All right, welcome to Freyman CPA. This is Greg Freyman. I'm bringing to you today a how-to QBO tutorial. This tutorial is going to go over the basics of QuickBooks Navigation. QuickBooks has come a long way since we first started using it. I started using QuickBooks right out of college back in 2004. It was still very clunky. It was not the tool it is today. It was still very manual. Nowadays, it's highly automated, it's robust, it comes with a ton of features, and most are starting to use QuickBooks Online. There's a lot of differences between desktop and online version. The online version might not be exactly right for your line of work. It depends on what it is you're doing. And every single client will have some sort of different optimization happening. So that's really important to also kind of understand before you just go running with QuickBooks, because QuickBooks has very different varieties. It has a self-employed, it has essentials, it has plus. But if you're looking at like a high inventory type of structure, this is probably not going to be the right tool for you. You might need the desktop version of Enterprise. But if you're like most and you have a small business, chances are QuickBooks is going to be right for you. QuickBooks Online is going to be right for you. And it can do many great things. Another perk about working with QuickBooks Online is that it's constantly being updated. So there's new features being rolled out all the time, whether that's a cash receipts feature. I'm guessing soon they'll have like a content management tool inside of it where it's going to help you organize your workflow for your business, so on and so forth. So just if you're going to be stuck with QuickBooks, I think that eventually it'll really pay off for you. Now, this video, again, I'm just going to go over the navigation. I'll leave some things for other videos because there's only so much time I can fit in. But this one should really give you like a great overall understanding of what to do first. So let's dive right in. Once you're set up with your company and you've connected your bank account, obviously you can still go back to your settings and update those things if you haven't done it quite right. But this is the Essentials version of QuickBooks. It's nothing. I didn't go with the plus. It's the midline version, and that's usually sufficient for most people. When you're going to log in, probably you're going to see your overview upon logging in, and I'll be honest with you, accountants don't really use this feature, as well as the dashboard. We don't really use this feature because unless we're working on it 24/7, this really becomes useless. As well, being an accountant, you'll understand more about looking at the reporting, because the reporting is what really matters. These are really nice dashboards, but they're very, if they're working right, it'll give you the right information. But if the books are not working right, this information tends to be useless. So being a trained accountant, we're always looking at reports, and I would suggest that you look at reports too, because that'll actually tell you a lot more. It'll tell you if things are wrong right away. So when we pick up a set of books, that's where we typically look. I don't look at dashboards. Again, I've been an accountant for over 15 years. This is all I've ever done. I've never done anything else, and I am a CPA. So I'm very comfortable around financial statements. And so that's basically what these books are meant to do. The books are also meant to become your tax filings. A lot of people don't quite get that connect. But it is something that once you're finished for the year, you should lock the books for that year, because those books become your tax filing. You don't want that information to accidentally be distorted in any way. That being said, let's look at some navigational points. So this was a dashboard, which I don't recommend really using. I do recommend constantly working in the banking. I do recommend constantly being in the reports section. That's what's going to tell you the balance sheet and the profit and loss are the two reports that are the most important. And in the next video, I'll go over the relationship between the two, and I'll actually dive into a little bit of the accounting entries and what's happening within QuickBooks. For now, I'm just going to stick to getting the data in and the navigational points. So again, reports important, right? Banking really important, all right? And then you have the gear up on the right. The gear up on the right is another important navigational area. What you want to understand is the chart of accounts. You want to understand importing data, reconcile. Those are, well, actually, let me take that back. Forget importing data. Reconcile your chart of accounts, maybe accounts and settings, are probably the first three things you should really understand, okay? And chart of accounts. So let's go back into banking for a minute, okay? So this is your banking area. This is where you're gonna start working right away. So when I put a person to train QuickBooks, I basically, this is where I put them to work first of all, because anybody can do this. I've had my teenage kids do this. This is simple. So what is the banking section of QuickBooks really? It really is a no man's land, if you will. It means that the information is being downloaded or imported from bank feed, okay? And it's actually bringing that in to QuickBooks, but not just yet. It's actually in a holding place, basically, it's not in the system yet, but your job is to bring it into the accounting system. So every time you see this information here, it's getting ready to be added. That's why that action is there. This section is to add, match, and so on. Some important things you can sort. Sorting by date, by description, by payee, by category, by amount spent or received is a great way to quickly sort through information and bulk do the work. So instead of, once you, let's say you've identified all your Facebook because you've sorted by the description Facebook, then you can just quickly add all of these into advertising or what have you, okay? In bulk or one at a time. Well, obviously we want to make our jobs easier, and QuickBooks will do that for you too. Speaking of making things easier, since we're in banking, the next part of banking that's very useful are rules. And rules is a QuickBooks tool that will help you to create a rule in QuickBooks that will apply AI. In other words, it'll start thinking for you and based off of bank description. So let's go back into banking. So again, keep in mind the banking area is where the bank feed has been entered, the raw data has been entered, and the description section is really what it's saying, it's the bank detail, okay? So bank detail is so this is where things can get tripped up. And that's why even though, QuickBooks can highly automate things for you, I still don't recommend it to take it to that degree where it'll start adding data for you, because the bank detail will change every now and then when you're coming back and it's adding things for you into the wrong categories, you just created a whole bunch of work for yourself where you have to recategorize a lot of data. And you might not even know it if you're not looking at reports, okay? So that's very important to understand. So we want to create the rules, and we want to make sure that it gives us the option to, for us to still add it, to still review it before we actually bring it into the QuickBooks data, okay, into the QuickBooks file. All right, so let's go ahead and create a quick rule. Actually, before we do that, so again, description is the bank detail that comes in originally. It'll show up as the memo. The payee is who you're paying, Facebook, and this is all amount spent, it's not receipt, okay? Category is really what we're talking about when we say category, it's the accounts. So let's go back to chart of accounts. And what are accounts, okay? Chart of accounts are here, as I mentioned. All right, these are your chart of accounts, and you'll usually get like a preset chart of accounts based off of your answers that you've predetermined when you were starting your books and records, and they're pretty cookie cutter. They're probably not gonna suffice for what you're doing, because you might want to have slightly different wording, or you might want it to match your taxes, or you might want more detail. All right, so these are your chart of accounts, and this is where already accounting education comes in. You have to understand what accounts are and how they work and how the transactions flow through them. And again, I'll save that for another video, but for now, all you really need to understand is that, you have your banking here, you have your assets like inventory, you have your equity section, that's what you're paying in or pulling out of the business, you have income items, and then you have all your expense items. All right, so that's very simple to understand, really. So we're dealing, when we're bringing in banking, this is all going to, in this example, this is all expenses. So leaving it as an uncategorized expense for Facebook is really not a good idea. That's for things we don't know how to categorize. So something like this, it would be advertising and marketing. All right. So anyway, so let's go ahead and create a rule for something like this, just to make our lives easier. And we'll create a new rule, and we'll call it Facebook, because that's the name of the rule that we're applying. And it's going to ask me where to apply this, if this money is coming out and which bank accounts, because maybe I just want to apply this rule to just one bank account, and maybe I just want to apply this rule to money in only. So anyway, so then it wants me to include, like, how's it going to recognize the rule? How's it going to do its thinking? Well, it's going to go by the description, or we can do bank text, which is really one and the same, or amount. So amount would be more where we're like, well, if it's over $100, then it might not be marketing anymore. This might be some other expense, so we might pull it off to the side. But let's just keep things simple. So we want it, whenever it sees in the description the word Facebook, we want it to put it into an expense, and we want to use the account or category of advertising and marketing. All right, and the payee would be Facebook. All right, so here's that section I was telling you about, automatically confirm transaction this rules apply to, auto add. So auto add would make QuickBooks just basically add it all for you. But remember what I said, if you do that, it'll trip up, because bank detail sometimes changes as transactions change during the year. So it's not always going to look the same, and then it might add it for you incorrectly, or it might add it for you before you have a chance to review it. So it's not there yet. When the technology gets there eventually, yeah, that's probably going to be my recommendation. For now, I still think you should double check that, because it does trip up. Trust me, I've seen it. So let's go ahead and save that rule. And what it's done, as you can see, now it tells you this rule has been applied. It's pre-populated everything. And now it's ready to go into the accounting system. So I can add them one at a time, like so, or I can bulk add. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and then 3 items selected, except I just got 3 items into the system. Notice now here what's happening. So in QuickBooks, again, I have not connected a real bank account to this set of books. This is just an example file. So there's no actual bank balance. Usually if there's a real bank account connected, this would show some sort of balance. Hopefully you have some money in there. And this is actually reading what's in the bank now as of today. And this is going to tell me what's in QuickBooks. I just added 5 transactions. I have $5,513 has been accepted, and that's why it looks like a minus. These 2 numbers don't always match. All right, don't freak out if they don't match. That's pretty much normal because of processing. So some data is still processing, and it might not be appearing here in your download because it hasn't finished processing. The bank hasn't finished processing it. So most of the time, you'll always notice that there's a difference. That's why we don't use these automatic type of dashboards. We go by the good old-fashioned way of doing things. We do reconciliations, that we look at reports. That's what's really telling me what's going on in the accounting system. That's how a trained accountant looks at things. That's how I would recommend you look at it too. The more you start thinking like an accountant, the better it is going to be for you. Now back to these basics. So once we get to like a certain part here, let's say I wanted to do the work and not create a rule. Well, QuickBooks nowadays is smart enough. Now let's add vendors. Okay, so let's step back a bit. So there's when money's coming out, we want to call them vendors in QuickBooks. When money's coming in, typically it's customer, maybe a patient, or maybe a client is the name. That's why you see QuickBooks says vendor/customer. But again, if you're a doctor, for you it's a patient, and you have that option in the account settings to change around how you're calling the people that pay you. And by the way, you can also be paying an employee. QuickBooks has that functionality too. But let's just keep things simple. This is money spent. These are going to be your vendors, people that you pay for doing business. So let's go ahead and instead of adding it in the vendor center, we can shortcut it and add it here. So click funnel. Let's just assume that this was marketing. And here's that section where you can change it to employee, vendor, customer. We're going to save that. All right, advertising and marketing. So what is QuickBooks going to do? QuickBooks is going to say, oh, okay, great, you added one. Now let's add a second one also. And now what is QuickBooks going to do? It's going to start to think. You see, notice it went from black to green. Well, wow, why is that? Because it starts to think for you. It's like, wait a minute, I'm beginning to see a pattern. So once you see it's green, that doesn't automatically mean that you should start accepting it like that, because QuickBooks is basically just starting to think for you, but it'll still trip up. Just because you see it's green doesn't mean good to go. And notice that this column is 0. So if you were just to come in, oh, great, it looks green, it looks like ClickFunnels and click add, well, it won't add the payee. So you always want to populate the payee name or the vendor name. Why? Because when you're going to run reports later and you want to find issues that you created, we all make those issues. Even I have been doing this, like I said, 15 years. I still want to sort my data in the reporting and look through it in different ways, so that way I can understand what I'm bringing into the system. And if I don't have the payee there, I really don't have a quick way of sorting things, and I might be looking at hundreds of transactions for a year, and it's just all mishmash. I can't sort quickly by name. So I can't tell if that account is correct, if everything that's sitting in advertising and marketing is really advertising, because I'll just have jumbled data for a whole year worth. All right, so that's not going to really help me. So you got to make sure that the vendor section is always complete. That this area, whether it's vendor, customer, whatever, this always has to be complete. Notice what happened. All right, notice that now this transaction has something pre-populated there, where the other ones are blank. Notice how Facebook has something here. So if I was just to add this, that I can tell you for sure is going in the right place and is going to be fully pre-populated. This, everything below has nothing in that column. Nothing's pre-populated. But let's go ahead and add this transaction. So usually though, after you do this a few times, QuickBooks will start to ask you to add auto rules. For some reason, it's not doing it now, and that's still one of those things that it's kind of clunky. It doesn't always do what we expect it to do, because they're still working on it. But that's the gist of it. That's how you add data into your accounting system. As far as the other navigational panes, that's really, I don't want to draw out this this video into forever, because we can keep going and going. I just want you to understand that these are the most important parts of what you'll typically be working with as you're learning. These are like the first few things you need to know. The reconcile, all right, that's when you're going to reconcile your books to your banking, your credit card, to your loans, whatever statements. Your chart of accounts, again, I went over that. And account settings. This is where you can, utilize more of QuickBooks features. And you have advanced settings. This is where you can start messing around with things like automation, tax forms, locking books, as we say, when we don't want to have things like, for example, incorrect items happen. So let's say like I'll accidentally bring in something for a year that's been filed. I want the QuickBooks to lock the books. So that's why we have this closed books feature. If we add that, and we do 12/31/2020 and save, it won't allow me to. I just gave it a password. Let's make it 21. Right? This is a really important feature. I want to lock my books for any year that I've already filed, because I don't want something to accidentally happen to those books. And then distort the data that's been filed, because then sometimes that won't balance returns, and that'll create more accounting time. So you don't want that to happen. Those are really like one place that I'm always very concerned with. A lot of this other stuff, you probably won't be using unless you have foreign transactions or you're tracking time. And again, that's going to be beyond the scope of this video blog. I think payments is also something you don't really need to worry about right away. Expenses is also something you don't want to worry about right away. Sales you might want to mess around with, depending on if you're doing invoicing or not. I'm not going to go into invoicing. Again, we can keep going on and on about all the features and all the things that QuickBooks does. Let's just keep it simple for now. So just kind of understand what this area is for. Look it over. See if you have any kind of things that you want to do. Obviously, you want to pre-fill your company info. You want to get your logo there. You might want to get your legal name, tax ID, your tax forms, all that basic stuff in, so that way it looks a little presentable once you start getting some invoices out there. Yep, and again, you can connect in the banking area. You can connect many different accounts. This is just one. Typically, for a real client, I'll have like maybe 3 or 4 accounts, and they could be credit cards, they can be loans, they can be your line of credit, your banking, and so on. So that's really a great feature. You can import data. You can import different types of data into QuickBooks. So that's the basic gist of it. So again, accountant settings, definitely got to explore that once you're in there. It's all very self-explanatory. Chart of accounts is really a really important idea. And again, I'll do a separate video just on chart of accounts. This is just, I want you to understand the most basic areas and how we navigate all the time. Another very important navigational tool is the search feature. We're constantly working with the search feature. I can't describe to you how important it is. We're always looking for information in QuickBooks because that's the fastest way to get through things. I'm always looking for amount, line, or total in all transactions. I'm always looking for the display name. That's like your vendor name. I'm always looking in memo or reference when I'm looking for things. So this is something that if once you get good enough to kind of understand where QuickBooks is going and what it's doing, this is another area that you're going to be going to, because things don't always work right in QuickBooks and you want to find references very fast. And you can open multiple instances of QuickBooks. So I can open up this QuickBooks file in my Firefox, and I can also open another instance of QuickBooks in, let's say, Safari or what have you. What is it? Use Chrome as well. So you can actually have 2 windows running. There's a couple of ways to do that. I still just open a separate browser. That seems to work best for me. I know my colleagues, they kind of just open up a second window within Firefox. I don't know why I still don't do it. New transactions, this is also an important part. If you're trying to add expenses, checks, bills, invoicing, transfer, bank deposits, journal entries is really more for accounting already. Invoicing, receiving payments, all this stuff is here. That's really another key important area that you'll be running a lot of. And then reports, so that's when the data starts actually coming in to QuickBooks. And like I said, that tells me everything, right? So my profit and loss has no income, and it has just advertising and marketing for $6,000. Here's all the transactions I just downloaded. And like I said, now I can quickly sort by name. You see how quick that was? Now imagine this was like for thousands of transactions for a client, right? And they were all jumbled and there was no name. I can't quickly sort by any other way. So it becomes really difficult for me to see if that account, the advertising and marketing account, is right, because now I have to sort through a ton of little data and kind of like really look at every line by line and maybe export it to Excel and sort it by description, and that's not perfect, so I have to resort it and then sort it again and then get an idea if that account's correct. Remember, when you're reporting, you're not just doing whatever, folks. You're reporting to the government, all right? That's one thing that people need to understand, is that every time you're putting a number on a tax return, it carries risk. You're attesting to it when you're signing the return on the penalties of perjury. You're saying that these numbers are good, that you're basically taking a tax position, okay? And sometimes that really makes a difference. So if you're looking at, Facebook, well, yeah, that's very easy to identify. But what about your Publix? What about, shopping at the Walmart? You know how many clients I have that buy gift cards at Publix? Plenty. And those have completely different tax consequences. So you can't automatically assume, being an accountant, that Publix shopping is for the office. It could also be a bunch of personal spending, right? Which we're not supposed to do. So therefore, again, that's something that comes with more training, more understanding of how to run the business, how to do it, how to run the business, not only from just getting the data in and day-to-day stuff, but also for audit proofing purposes. Your books is your go-to for everything. You got to be able to look at your books 4 years from now, pick up a shred of paper and say, there it is. It was right there all along. Here's the receipt. And by the way, QuickBooks does allow you to attach receipts to your transactions, because you want to be able to use your books for everything. That's your tax return. So you shouldn't have receipts in one place in the shoebox, and your transactions are all commingled and they're not in their right accounts. Everything needs to be ironed out. Remember, now you're doing accounting. It's all about detail. That's what accountants do. We want to keep things itemized well. Why? For audit proofing purposes. All right, well, I hope you guys got a whole bunch of information from me on good practices, overall orientation on QuickBooks, what are the fast points that you want to focus on and really start to understand those the best, and how to think like an accountant, how to basically navigate as an accountant. So that's a lot for the first try. Hopefully I didn't overdo it and gave you enough information to make you dangerous and have a more constructive conversation with your accounting team as you're working through your books and records and learning how to use QuickBooks Online. If you like what you see, guys, do me a favor, subscribe, hit that like button, let us know that we're doing a good job. I promise I'll bring you better content every single time. I love this stuff. I've been doing it forever. And remember, our motto here is your success is our success all day, every day at Freyman CPA. Have a great one. God bless.